Since we've just seen the very final sequence of that film, I thought I might start by asking you about that. This image of the sack being sewn up, and people have pointed out it's a very interesting image for the final film of Buñuel's career to end on, because of the way his career began with Un Chien Andalou and the slitting of the eyeball. It's almost like the opposite image in a way. But it's interesting that you said
the first image that Buñuel dealt with ever shot in his life was the razor cutting the eye of a sheep. And the last image he shot was the two hands, because I know it is the last image because this shot is a remake. He wasn't happy. So 3 weeks after the end of the film, he re-shot the close-up, which is really the last shot he has ever shot.
I mean, amazing, particularly given
the whole work of Buñuel is in between this, cutting and repairing.
It feels like it closes the book on his career. It's interesting you say it wasn't necessarily going to be his last film, but it's a sort of perfect accident in a way.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I refused to make another film.
Oh, right. So you'd written the script for the following one, but he was too unwell.
Yeah, the film was, the script was, at least the first version of the script was written, and it has been published in Spain, in Spanish, but he couldn't find the strength, the physical strength to do it. And he came one day and he told me, "Listen, Jean-Claude," he was with tears, in his eyes, "I'm afraid I can't make any other film." I was as moved as he was.
I should ask you now about the famous stories on the set of this film with the casting, because it wasn't originally intended to be two actresses playing the role of Conchita. How did that happen?
No, let's say that the film is based on a French novel from the turn of the 20th century by Pierre Louis, which was one of the few writers that he liked very much in his youth. They were sort of prohibited in Spain when he was a student. And The Woman and the Puppet, La Femme et le Pantin by Pierre Louis, was one of the films that he wanted to make for a long time already. This relation between, the strange relation between a man and a woman, he tried already to make a film out of it with Vittorio De Sica in the 60s, and he couldn't raise the money, and the film was badly made with Brigitte Bardot. It was one of the Bardot films. Then much later, he came back to this idea and told me, "Have you seen the film?" I said, "No. I don't want you to read the script that I had written. Let's forget about it. But what about making a new film based on the same novel?" I said, "Why not?" I was free. I knew the novel, of course, but not the script. And we start working as usual, in Spain and then in Mexico, in remote places, the two of us, totally alone. And around the end of the script, we realized, we knew from the very beginning that this woman has no definition at all. It's difficult to pin exactly what she is, to say she's that type of a woman. And one day he said, or I said, I don't know, I don't remember, in Mexico, in the spa where we were working, he said, maybe we could have several actresses to play the same part, and at least two, And we took the script, and we made, one should be popular, easygoing, like charming, and the other one more distant, more distinguished, more from the west of Paris, the high society. And we sort of share the script. That scene would go to that one, that scene would go to number 2, number 1, number 2, and we did a sort of a découpage of the script. And at the end, at the end of the day, he said, no, that's totally absurd. I mean, nobody ever dared of doing this. And he called it, I remember, Le Caprice d'un jour pluvieux, which means the whim of a rainy day, So, and we forgot about it. Then he chose a French actress, which was rather good and very known at the time, And he started normally shooting in Spain. And after 3 or 4 days, he called Silberman, the producer, and told him, I can't do with this actress. It's impossible. What I do is not interesting, not good at my point of view. So Silberman went to Madrid. I wasn't there, but both told me the same scene, the same way. So I suppose it is true, you know. So they went into a bar. The bar is the place where to make the good decisions, you know. Always. We have to know that. You know. And
a bar with no music.
Yes, no music. A bar without music, of course. A bar with music is not really a bar, you know. So Buñuel said to Serge, to Silberman, who knew already, I'm going to stop the film because I can't go any further with this actress. So, of course, the producer was very sad because he had invested already some money. He had no film, nothing. Everything was to be stopped. So after a while, having a drink, Buñuel all of a sudden asked the producer, Serge, do you know a woman who could be all women? And Serge understood immediately and said, you want to make the film with several actresses? And Buñuel said, 2 would be enough. And that's how it started. I mean, they destroyed the decoration in Madrid, which was already built. They took it to Paris, to a studio in Paris, and they chose 2 actresses which Buñuel had already made some essay, you know, some trials, test with the 2 of them. Carol Bouquet, who is the distinguished young one, and Angela Molina, who was still is Spanish. But of course, the film was supposed to be in French. So one of the secrets of the film, I don't know if you noticed, is that they're not 2, there are 3, because both of them are dubbed with a 3rd actress, and they have the same voice. The fact that they have the same voice adds a lot to the unpersonification of the characters. You know what I mean? So that's how the film was made, and for the rest there is nothing to say except that it was the normal problems with shooting, you know. But at the end, when the film was presented, sometimes we made some tests. Half of the audience didn't notice that there were 2. So, which was quite strange, you know. Especially in America, there was a screening one day. We are in Europe. You can feel it. We had a screening one day in the UCLA, you know, in University of Los Angeles. 60% of the students had not noticed that there were 2. So that's a masterpiece for Luis. You know. And also to finish with this, because that's, of course, that's the main aspect of the film. It has there's not only this in the film. I mean, one day I was working with Peter Brook for 40 years, you know, for a long time.
Peter Brook, that's his
Peter
name.
Brook, yes, in Paris, and Peter Brook has something to do with England, I believe. You know.
Yes, just a little.
And Peter was talking to me about a performance of Hamlet with 3 actors playing Hamlet in the same production. And he was telling me about how the old identification between one character and one actor slowly disappears, at least on the theater. And I said to him, did you see the latest Buñuel film? He said, my God, he is the first one to do it. I mean, without going to the theater, Buñuel had felt that something was there, where something new was there, you know. As a matter of fact, he had never been done before.
And now we have films like I'm Not There, it's now
Yeah.
a device that gets used quite a bit.
Yes, I don't know, I have no example, but I'm sure it is.
Diego, let's bring you in. You were 2 years old when this film was made, so presumably too young to really remember.
No, I've got great memories of the shoot now.
But
sucking my thumb mostly.
You were alive, I think, for the last 8 years of your grandfather's life. What memories do you have? You can tell us.
Well, the house was in Mexico City, so obviously you have to imagine that I would come from France and go to Mexico, and it was a very exotic house with palm trees and so on and so forth. But that's not really interesting. What's interesting was his office, where I used to hang out most of the time, and you had this closet. Felt a little bit like the closet of Barbe Bleue, you know, the Bluebeard there. You couldn't open it or something, but I would always dig into that. And that's where he kept all his trophies and his prizes that were kind of like
Hidden
and jumbled together, you know, like in a pile of stuff. So you had the Venice Lion, and you had the Oscar, and you had the Palm of Cannes, all that stuff. And I would just play with him, you know, like you would play with, like, you know, little toy tin soldiers and so on and so forth. And one day I was digging in his desk. I pulled out this
you know that one day he accepted to be photographed holding the Oscar, but he with a huge wig and black glasses, not to be recognized.
And a fake mustache. And so the guy had the picture of my grandfather with the Oscar, and everyone was like, "Well, who's this guy?" It was a useless thing. And one day I find this little picture of my grandfather disguised as a nun, you know, with a cornet there and makeup on himself, and so I'm like, "Pepe, this looks really like you." And he was very embarrassed and took it and hid it away. But
it was him.
It was him, of course.
Paris.
In Paris, yeah, in the 20s. And what's interesting, though, and that's what we were commenting about earlier, is that it's difficult to grow up watching these movies because there was tape player over there, and I would watch. We didn't really have Disney flicks to look at in the Buñuel household. And it started with Robinson Crusoe, which is a film that he had made in the U.S. In the 50s, and then several other films. But what was the most striking now, and retrospectively, is sexuality. I mean, all these films were just pregnant with, legs and ankles and tits and this and that. And when you were young, I would watch those, and I was like, oh, that looks nice, And he had some of the most amazing actresses in all his films, like Simon of the Desert, had Sylvia Pinal, you had Carole Bouquet, you had Catherine Deneuve, everyone, every actor.
Now I understand something about you.
I know, my perversions. But there were all these scenes which influence you, or these images in Los Olvidados, for example, also when she's cleaning her legs.
Yeah,
there's all these things. And it's true that it's difficult to, and these women I grew up meeting also, so it was very like, there's a great film called The Phantom of Liberty also, where there's a scene where this extraordinarily beautiful woman called Anne-Marie de Rougemont, who was Louis Malle's wife
at that time,
is whipping a guy, against the bed like that in front of monks. I'm just giving you the context of that. And she was my neighbor when I was growing up my whole life. And when I would come back from school, as both my parents are movie directors and would be shooting somewhere, I usually stopped by her house, and she'd put me on her lap and feed me chocolate. And you have to understand that Anne-Marie de Rougemont is like a goddess. I mean, I swear to God, is one of the most gorgeous women, like a la, what's her name? On en parlait hier. No, it's a terrible memory for names. Anyway. No, Brigitte Bardot. That kind of.
That's the beginning of the end.
I
when
know.
you lose the
At
memory of the
beginning
names,
of my end has started many years ago, apparently.
So get used to it.
I want to talk a bit about Buñuel's style, perhaps because you studied film, so you would have had to look at his films perhaps as a student. But I've also brought along one of Jean-Claude's books, which is called The Secret Language of Film. And there's just a very short paragraph I was going to read out about the Buñuel style, if my voice will handle it. Buñuel did not want mystery to emanate from a well-contrived chiaroscuro, from the timely creaking of a door, from blurring, from slow motion. He thoroughly distrusted every kind of cinematographic effect, rejecting it as facile or arty. He sought what was unseen rather than what was obscure. He was wary of beauty. Yet rather than seeking, for example, a repetitive formalism on the lines of Yasujiro Ozu's fixed frames and low-angle camera, he saw a mysterious hypnotic power in the trembling of the frame's borders, in the almost imperceptible movement of the camera, like the wavering head of a snake seeking prey. I love that passage, and I think it just captures so well how unfussy Buñuel is as a
if you
stylist.
notice in that film, for instance, Fernand Doré arrives with one of the two women, goes out with the other one. He doesn't notice at all, not at all. And they're exactly the same. There is nothing done to establish some kind of confusion at all, He plays the game, right? He doesn't use these tricks, I was talking about. Not at all. They are perfectly visible. the photography is clear, he could absolutely recognize, but he doesn't. That the whole mystery is that why. There is no answer to the why, but the fact is that it is like this, and we have to think about ourselves, which are the things or the persons then in each of our personal lives we do not recognize, and however they are familiar. I suppose that we could find a lot of examples. In that case, it's a man madly in love with a woman who is two. That's the mystery of the film. We don't have to explain. That's all. That's the way it is. And Buñuel was, from that point of view, extremely objective. He didn't try to hide, as I said, that with obscurity, mystery, strange noises of no, nothing. That's the way it is. You think what you want.
But also, he shot very fast too. I mean, these are shoots that would take 2-3 weeks. How long did some of the films take?
The whole film? Oh no, more than that. No. He shot in 7 weeks.
7 weeks. But on the Mexican films, also some of them.
The
were
Mexican
done,
were some of them, like Los Olvidados, were shot in 18 days. Mm-hmm. Which is even less than 3 weeks, but night and day. No, the French films were normal, but he never used more than 20,000 meters of film, which is very, very little. Some of the directors use 50, 60,000. And he was perfectly, organized. He knew absolutely well. He had a personal system to establish the shooting, what shall I shoot this day, that day, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, perfectly well. Who do I need this day? That was very well organized, perfectly. And, he had a long experience, I must say, And also, what he knew very well, as a technician, he knew the work of the camera very well. Very often, I saw him correcting the work of the cameraman, of the chief operator, telling, for instance, oh yes, excuse me. And so the
light,
the light wasn't wrong, wasn't right, was wrong. Many times in silence, without trying to hurt the feelings of the technician, of course. So he knew very well the techniques of the cinema, and that's another thing. Why the films that he made, especially the last ones, look so simple, but this simplicity is based on a deep knowledge of what he could have done instead of this,
You make documentaries, Diego. Have you found any of these precepts of style helpful in your own work at all, from having studied them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I directed mostly documentaries in conflict areas. So Afghanistan, Iraq, and North Korea, and whatever, so on and so forth, for many years, for a long time. Congo, and so on and so forth. But what's interesting about not shooting a lot is the same thing. I started in print. I was a print reporter for the Chicago Tribune and then the Miami Herald as a crime reporter over there. And it's a long story, but anyway, I eventually got into TV because friends of mine said, print is dead, move on. And I was first a TV reporter, which I would just do the questions, and I had a cameraman with me. And I was always looking at the camera. I was like, what does this button do? And if you turn this, what happens? And so on and so forth. I was always very curious. And I'd say that I was a fairly average reporter, not very, as good, but not, nothing exceptional. And one day I was in Kuwait City in 2003, right before the invasion of Iraq by the U.S. forces, and I went there to be embedded with the U.S. Marines. But as a French journalist, it was a little bit difficult in 2003 to get an embed because we had said it was a bad idea to go in there. I don't know who would say that. Anyway. And they gave me one spot, and I said, no, I need two because I need my camera. And they said, we're giving you one spot. And that day I had to take the camera on my shoulder and start shooting. And I can't explain it in any other way that it was some kind of genetic thing where I put my eye in and I started shooting, and the world just aligned, like the Matrix. Like suddenly I could see what I was meant to do, and I shot a lot. I shot for 4 or 5 years as a cameraman and a sojo, so solo journalist on those docs, and I shot very little. Same thing, because for several years before I was a TV journalist, but I was in the editing rooms, and it's really in the editing rooms that you realize what you need to shoot and how you need to do it. And the more editing you do, the more you realize that you just need that. And everything is being built in your head and in your mind. And that's really how I shot many of my work. And I realized afterwards that my grandfather did that also. But by planning things and by thinking about it and by reliving it before it happens, you control the events. Now, he had it easier in a way because it was a controlled set, despite the fact that there's all kinds of problems on movie sets. But I had to do the same thing with the reality moving around. But that's really, I think, one of the things that inspired me. Also, is to find the humor in tragedy, and I think that that's what my grandfather did with a lot of films. He did humor in surrealism. I always say that I did humor in hyperrealism, because the world is not black and white. There's 50 Shades of Grey, without wanting to borrow the title of a bad movie. But it's that thing that's important, is to try to find what is intricately human in tragic situations.
Before I throw it open, I've got one more question for each of you. You mentioned thinking in bars, and that's the best place to think. I think you and Luis had a kind of ritual, didn't you? At the end of every day, you mentioned in this book that you used to leave each other alone for a little while.
First of all, we were totally alone, without wives, without friends, like two monks, sometimes for 2 months, which was not so easy, living together, eating together, walking together, swimming together sometimes, and going to the bath, and that it was to reach a certain type of concentration, to be alone with the story. And the moment we couldn't stand it anymore, we would part and come back 2 or 3 months later. During the 2 things to say: when we would come back to the first draft of the film, things that seemed to us agreeable and pleasant all of a sudden had lost any interest. On the contrary, some solution that we were looking for, now they were there. What does it mean? That during 2 or 3 months, without seeing each other, we had what we called an invisible worker, the 2 of us, working inside of without us knowing it. And a very convenient worker, because he doesn't want to be paid. He doesn't want to be fed. He is never on strike. He works night and day, even if we are working on something else. And when we meet together again, the invisible workers, his and mine, have done the job. That's something very mysterious. I talked to some psychoanalysts about it. They said, perfectly right. We all have, but we don't all know that we have an invisible worker. The other thing is that at the end of every day, after 6 hours of hard work, working on the script, instead of going to the pool or whatever, we would take half an hour in our room alone to invent every day a new story. Story that could be long, short, in relation with the script or not, And after half an hour, we would meet in the bar, sacred place, and tell each other what we had imagined during this half an hour. It was not just to add something to the script, but to train our mind not to be lazy, not to believe that the day was over, that the work was finished at all, And I don't know how many stories have crossed the air in the bars where we were talking, And sometimes Buñuel generally arrived first, and I was seeing him, from when I was entering the bar, and sometimes he was like this and looking at me and said, that meant my story is not good. I found something that's very bad. Some other days he would come, I have something that could interest you, and vice versa. That is like an athlete, training his body for the Olympic Games. Working with Buñuel, you find yourself as a finalist at the Olympic Games. There is no level, higher. So you have to be at your best. And that was one of the conditions, to be alone and to work night and day. And even when we were sleeping, the invisible worker would do his work. You know, it's very, to me, it's a fantastic experience, and also how to teach some young people. Many people ask me, you know, how to work, how to get an idea. It's impossible to answer. Nobody knows. You know, but there is a certain number of conditions of life and work that you need to respect. You know, an idea doesn't come to you like this, you know, without any work done by you. No, not at all. You get them when you are ready to get them. You know, that's for sure. You know.
Well, it's Picasso also that said that ideas always find him working.
Yeah.
or inspiration always finds me working.
If you want to get ideas, go to work.
We were talking earlier about the influence that Buñuel has had on other filmmakers, and for instance, Monty Python, we agreed, definitely very heavily influenced by his kind of comic tone and the sketch show approach of Phantom of Liberty. But you had a slightly more surprising one, Daft Punk, who you, I think...
Yeah, we did I commissioned a doc a few months ago on Daft Punk, who gave us, for the first time, access to their, you know, music, obviously, and personal, and you know, and you still don't see them, but all kinds of all their friends who are under contract not to speak. So we did a big doc about them, and I was speaking to them at one point, and they said, you know, this usual question I've had 100 million times in my life: are you related to, you know? Well, yeah, yes, he's my grandfather. He said, listen, I have to tell you something about him. It's one of the two who said that. I forget their names now again. Clearly, it is the beginning of the end. And he said, you know, we, the Daft Punk, consider Buñuel to be the first DJ in the history of humanity. And I was like, first, my grandfather could be the first of a lot of stuff, but DJ was not the first one that popped in my mind. And they said, yes, because we found out that when he showed the Andalusian Dog in Paris for the first time, he was behind the screen with two gramophones. One with Wagner, and one with tango. And he would switch from one to the other, while depending on the scenes that were on, to switch the music. And he says that's the first act of DJing in the history of humanity. So I am very proud to say that the Daft Punk consider my grandfather to be the world's first DJ.
Right, help me out now, guys. Let's have some questions. It's difficult for us to see.
Here we have
yes,
one here on the left. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my fault for putting my hand up. I should never do that ever again. Well, my question is for Jean-Claude. I love the story about you guys working together and going away, and I'm probably going to use that when I have to do something. But I was interested, of all the scripts you ever worked on, mostly here I'm talking about the ones that you actually did put on the screen, Milky Way, Phantom of Liberty. What was the hardest one to write? What was the one which gave you the most problems?
Difficult to answer, because 3 of them were adaptations of novels. So Belle de Jour, Diary of a Chambermaid, and this one. So at the beginning, at least we had something to talk about, to reject, to discuss, to accept, you know. On the other film, the Milky Way, Discreet Charm, and Phantom of Liberty, we had nothing. We had just, we were the 2 of us, and we had to invent what we call an original story. And that was even more difficult, because we had to agree. We had given one to the other what we call the right of veto. The right of veto means that you say something to me, you propose me an idea. I have 3 seconds, no more, to say yes or no. If I say yes, we can, you know, keep going and working on this idea. If I say no, you have no right to defend your idea. We have to go to another idea, you know, that just to gain time. You know, that was one of the rules of the work, which was not easy to respect sometimes, because you have an idea, you want to defend it. You think, you believe it's a good idea that we could not. No. But it forces the imagination to go every time further. You know, in territories that you would never think that you have them inside yourself. You know what I'm talking about. It's like a discovery oh yes, there was also this that I never thought about. You know, yeah. That's why it's difficult to say that this film was more difficult than another one. But at least with the novels, we had something. There, nothing. You know, in the Discreet Charm, at the beginning, we didn't know at all where we were going, but we were going.
Thanks for that. There was one further back, and there's one in the middle here as well. Yes, great.
Hello, Jean-Claude. I'm incredibly happy that you can actually be here and talk to us. You're one of the screenwriters I've most admired. Can I cheat and ask two completely disconnected questions? The first is to do with the fact that you have spent a huge amount of your career as a collaborator, and most well-known screenwriters are people famous for writing, you know, whatever, Chinatown, or having written alone. It's often what a lot of writers seek is to write alone. And you have been very much, you know, favourite collaborator of many different directors and writers, and curious to know what you would ascribe that to. And my other question is about this film, which is interesting at this moment, that the background of the whole story are these acts of terrorism. And I'm curious to know where that came from at that moment.
Let me first answer the second part of your question. Terrorism was, in the 10 last years of Buñuel, one of his obsessions. Not only in this film, but even in The Discreet Charm and in Phantom of Freedom, of Liberty. It is question of terrorism. It's something that he had in mind all the time, and he was even telling me, he told me one day, you know, I believe that terrorism is a new language that we have invented. You know, I want to tell you something, you don't want to listen to me. But if I send you a bomb, you will listen, you know, even if you're dead. You know, it's a new language, even that one day we could use that language in a family atmosphere. If I want to say something to my wife and she doesn't want to listen, or to the mother of my wife, I can send her, you know, a young man with a little bomb or a gun, you know, whatever. Considering terrorism as a language is very interesting, you know. Now, what was the first part of your question? Yeah, the collaboration, you know, apart from the writer of Veto, was a very close one. You know, we had to, at the beginning, in the first weeks, I was so impressed to find myself in front of Buñuel that I didn't dare to say no sometimes, you know. So he sent me, without telling me, the producer, Silberman, who had a dinner with me in Madrid, alone, without Buñuel, which was very strange. And at the end of the dinner, Serge told me, you know, Luis is very happy with you. He said that you're a good worker, that you're bright, that you are, but, famous but you should say no to him from time to time. You know? And Buñuel had asked Silberman to come just to tell me that, you know, not to be intimidated, just to do, you know. And a little bit, step by step, I tried to oppose myself to Buñuel and to propose new ideas. That's how we became close collaborators. Now, to the question why I'm not a film director, which was part of your question, that's the best decision I've ever made. You know, because when I was, at that time, the beginning, I was working with Pierre Tex, and we made some short films together, rather good. One of them won the Academy Award as a short film. And then I was offered to work with Buñuel as a screenwriter. And I decided that I would never be a film director. The moment you are a film director, you can't do anything else but films. You know, you have a tag on your shoulder, director. You are the little god in your little circle, but you can't do anything else. And I was tempted to write for the theater, which I did for 40 years with Peter Brook, to keep publishing, writing and publishing books, and so on. I have been like you. I was born in the first century to invent new languages, new ways of writing. If we were today at the end of the 19th century, we could talk only about theater and literature. Now think about all the new techniques that appear in the 20th century. I was extremely attracted to all of them, and I wanted to try, these new ways of writing. I was extremely interested. That's also why I accepted to found and preside for a long time the National Film School in Paris, to learn about the secret language of film, and not only of film, but a TV film has not the same language as a film for the cinema, for the movies. And what about all the new techniques that we are inventing every day? They need, look at your computer. There are signs in the alphabet that did not exist when you were born. And you have to know them if you want to keep working. And that's why I decided that I would never be a film director, and I was right. Since last year, I got in Hollywood an honorary Oscar for my career as a screenwriter. So I would never have got it as a director. You know what I mean? So I have no regret. I made 2 or 3 decisions that good in my life. One was to stop smoking, now to stop directing, and so on.
Thank you for that. Where are we next? There's someone down here, but yes, there's one up there, and then we'll come down here.
Where?
What's there? Yeah, right at the back. There we go. No. There was someone right at the very back, but they're not. No, they've stopped. Yeah, there we go.
It's great to meet you guys. Did you ever get a feeling that his life experiences, in terms of him being put into exile as a consequence of war, had any influence in terms of his filmmaking or his approach to dealing with certain subject matters that he dramatized within his filmmaking?
Alors, est-ce que Buñuel, est-ce que sa technique est d'avoir dû partir en exil de l'Espagne et puis ensuite de l'Europe, est-ce que ça a influencé sa façon de...
Yes, most probably, because he spent at least almost 10 years in America, and he knew, of course, how to make a film. He had made already 3 films in Europe, short films, but what he learned in America was how to use a camera, how to use a sport, how to use... That he was very good at it. He was much better than any of the Mexican directors that he met later. They were, asking technical advices from him. And that it was thanks to Hollywood. One day he told me he lived a long time, several years in Hollywood, and I have many anecdotes about it. But one day he knew very well Joseph von Sternberg, and who made also a film based on the same book, with Marlene Dietrich. And he knew him very well, and they were close friends. And one day he decided to go to the studio where Joseph was shooting, and he entered it was a film with Marlene or Greta Garbo, I don't know, one of them. And as soon as he put his foot in the studio, the star noticed a new present that she didn't know. So she said, this one, out. So he was fired by Greta Garbo. And he never put a foot in the studio again, but nevertheless, he knew how to work. And then I have so many stories about Buñuel in Hollywood that would make a book.
With Chaplin and all that stuff.
He knew Chaplin. He had a dinner. The very first day he arrived in Los Angeles, he had a dinner with some friends, and at the table there was somebody like this, whom he knew, he knew the face with grey hair, but he couldn't say who he was, It was Chaplin, without the mustache, and they became friends. They even worked a little bit together. And in 1972, we were invited in Los Angeles. At the Los Angeles Film Festival with the discrete genre of the bourgeoisie, who had won the Oscar for the best foreign film. And I knew George Cukor because I had worked already in Los Angeles. And he called me one day and he said, I heard that Luis Buñuel is in town. I said, yes, he is. Oh, I'd like so much to invite him with some friends, to a lunch. Cukor had a beautiful house in Bel Air. So I said, Buñuel said yes, and with Silberman and Raphael, the other son of Luis, who lived in Los Angeles, we went to that lunch. We arrived, and then we saw arriving one after the other, John Ford.
There's a very famous photo of this
yes.
event here. You can use it.
Yes, oh, I know them. And William Wyler, Hitchcock, Billy Wilder, who else? George Stevens, and Ruben Bermulian. All of them were there, honoring Buñuel, and he sat at the table. He was sitting next to Hitchcock, and I was sitting next to him, translating because he knew English, but he was deaf, so I had to translate what Hitchcock was saying to him, and vice versa. It was sort of a fantastic moment. It was like in Athens, the Mount Olympus. They were all there.
I think Hitchcock was a big fan of Tristano. Is that right?
Yeah,
we were talking about that.
He did explain. I realized that all these great American directors knew very well the work of the European directors. They had private screening rooms in their house, and every morning they would watch carefully one or two films. Hitchcock knew Tristana by heart. He was telling Buñuel, explaining Buñuel about his camera moving down and up, when he plays the piano, as if he had made the film himself. Buñuel was absolutely surprised, The quotation by Hitchcock that you put in it's not exactly the same. He was asked, which are your favorite directors? And the answer was me and Buñuel. But it was not Buñuel alone,
Thank you. Right. We've got a question here now.
Hello. What can I say? What we've just seen is probably my favourite film of all time. And
which one?
Well,
This one.
the one just now. And it has been for a few years now, since I first saw it when I was about 21. And there are a million questions I could ask about it, the depths of its sublimity and so forth. But really, I just want to talk about the real star of the film, the sack that is flung over the shoulder of a man going across the camera, and eventually Fernando Rey. Where did you find it, and what happened to it in the end?
The bag has something to do with the little box in Belle de Jour, he liked very much, and we did several times, but sometimes nobody notices that there is an object in the film which contains the film itself, the mystery of the film. This film, if somebody asks you, what is it about? It's about a man who is trying to make love to a woman and can't. That's all, But there is more than that. There is, to us, at least to us, what we try to put in the film. It's an image of a light mystery, which we call love or desire, sometimes confounding the two, And the mystery of this feeling is in the bag. That's why he carries the bag. That's all we can say. But when asked about the little box in Belle de Jour, what's in the little box, we used to answer anything. Buñuel will answer the portrait of Jean-Claude Carrière, who is so awful that the horse refused to go, and so on. And in the bag, which is more invisible than the little box, more discreet, there is this feeling that we can sometimes try to shoot, to give an idea, to come close to, but we can never totally reveal.
This is going to have to be our final question, unfortunately. We've just got one down here.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I'm a Michael Curtiz specialist, and women on the whole did not enjoy working for him, although he got extraordinarily good performances out of them. How did women enjoy? Did they like working with Buñuel? On the whole?
Yeah, very much. Yes, very much. But it was very nice to work with Buñuel because every day at 5 o'clock there was a pause with foie gras, with good wines. He took really good care of them. He was extremely precise on time, very much demanding sometimes, but a very nice man. He was not a tyrant. He was a seducteur, how do you say? You know, there are two types of directors: the tyrants and the people who go to seduce, who try to seduce the actors. It was the second category. I saw Buñuel. Look, that's very strange. No. Oui, mais le rouge. That's very strange that somebody who is an old friend of mine calls now. She doesn't know where I am. And we're talking about what?
About women.
The women.
No, but there was a situation that was quite interesting with and I love that story, and maybe you can share it with us about Catherine Deneuve on Belle de Jour, how they started working together, and when she came up and rewrote the script.
Belle de Jour, at the beginning, Catherine Deneuve was very young, and she was 23, 24, and Jean Sorel, the actor, was playing her husband. On the second or third day of the shooting, came up with the script. I was sitting next to Buñuel, and they said to him, "Listen, we don't really like the dialogue that we have in our scenes, husband and wife, and we rewrote the dialogue, if you don't mind." Oh, Buñuel said, "Okay, let me see, let me read," and he read carefully, page after page, and he gave me the page, and we read, and at the end he said, "But we are wonderful. It's extraordinary with Jean-Claude. We try for months to give the two characters a rather silly, ordinary, banal dialogue. In 10 minutes, you made even worse." So that was the beginning of their relationship. So after that, the following day, we went for the first time to the studio, and she was supposed, in that scene, to show a naked back. Never, she was asked to show her breast. You don't see anything in Belle de Jour. And she refused. For some reason, she said, "No, I don't want to take off my blouse or whatever." And I think for the only time in my life, I saw your grandfather, screaming really in a sort of fit of anger, extraordinary. "But what do you think you are?" He said to Catherine Deneuve, she saw, "You are just an analphabet. That's what you are. You don't know anything about anything." That was after a musical film called Les Parapluies de Cherbourg, where she had to sing. And he said to her, "What do you think I'm going to ask from you? That I'm going you to ask, 'I would like to be fucked in the ass'? No. That's not what I want. We are going to make a film here. You understand what I mean? A film." So she fainted. She was taken back to her dressing room, and at night we had a dinner, and we didn't know what to do. The producers were, "Well, if she stops, if she leaves the film, she has to pay for the whole film, according to her contract or whatever." And Buñuel was telling me, "What did I do? I'm silly. I mean, I'm an old man. I made 35 films. What did I say to that?" Well, the following day, of course, at 12 o'clock, at the beginning of the shooting, we were all at the studio waiting for what's going to happen. And she was already on the set with two, her husband was David Bailey at the time, the British photographer. And David was there, and the two other friends, She was already dressed ready for shooting, and she was playing with a beautiful plain gold lighter. Beautiful lighting, turning off, lighting, turning on, nervous, And Buñuel went, without saying a word, looked around to look for the first position of the camera, and all of a sudden he crossed the whole studio, took the lighter, and said, "Oh, thank you, Catherine. It's very beautiful." And she was so surprised that she said, "Yes, it was for you. I know, thank you." He put the lighter and said, "Now, gentlemen, if you want, we are going to work now. Please, if you can leave us alone." And he kept the lighter. It was, for that moment on, she was his slave. She wrote a long letter the very day that at the end of the day, you were right. I am an analphabet. I don't know what I say. And they made another film together, Tristana, and they were very good friends forever. So that's a way. That's a way of directing that you can't every time imitate. You know, it could lead to.
No, but there was also, you know, in Belle de Jour, there's a scene where Catherine is in her dream and she's attached wearing a white dress and shit is being flung at her. You know, I don't know if you've seen this picture. But
Bullshit.
And so the big problem is that no one dared to throw this mix of mud and stuff on Catherine Deneuve. I mean, you know, and so it's my father who decided to do it. And he grabbed her face and whacked her right in the face with it.
He did it very well.
Good shit slinger, my dad.
We've overrun already, unfortunately, but I just wanted to thank you all for staying and supporting the season. But specifically, can you thank, for me, Jean-Claude?
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll be back.